I was looking at my Google alert results yesterday, and it came up with a whole bunch of cases on stand your ground laws from a website I'd never heard of, energyportal.eu. And if you look at the heading there, it says energy market, green energy, nuclear oil, solid state batteries. Looks like it's all about energy. So why are they talking about stand your ground laws? So I thought that was kind of odd. They're all from this yesterday, by the way. 18 December 2023 is when this was published. And then I got this one about Alaska. So the first was Pennsylvania. Now they ask about Alaska's Make My Day law. And to my knowledge, Alaska's never had a Make My Day law, but it's the same website, energyportal.eu. Is it the same author? It does happen to be the same author. Let's see. Then I got another one. Arkansas, different author, but same publication, also 18 December 2023. And then I got another one. Rhode Island, by yet another author. And this was published the day prior, 17 December 2023. And I thought, well, that's really odd. Why would an energy website be covering self-defense law? So I actually just went to energyportal.eu and it gives you a whole bunch of stories. But none or few of them appear to be about energy. Here's one about traveling from Arizona to Atlanta. A chicken recipe. Lots of recipes. Something about good chefs reading the entire recipe first. Lazy fried rice. Now an article about a new retirement law in Virginia for public employees. Gordon Ramsay, a famous chef, of course. So it doesn't seem that the content they cover has much to do with energy. But nevertheless, here we have this legal stuff here. So I thought, well, let me take a look. Maybe they did a good job. So, stand your ground laws near Pennsylvania. What you need to know. The headline alone is kind of weird, right? Why wouldn't you be writing about stand your ground laws of Pennsylvania? Why pick a state and then cover other states around it? Kind of odd. But in any case, what they actually are talking about really is Pennsylvania and stand your ground. So what do they have to say? And a lot of this, again, if you've ever queried ChatGPT, you'll see this is the tone in which it provides responses. It's a very, very similar feel. The stand your ground law. It's a weird phrasing. I would have said stand your ground laws have been a topic of controversy and debate across the different states in the U.S. However, it's important to note that Pennsylvania does not have a specific stand your ground law in place. Well, I thought that was odd because, as you might imagine, I've looked at Pennsylvania stand your ground law, duty to retreat law, that element of avoidance, one of the 5 elements of self-defense. And when I look at the actual law, Pennsylvania does, in fact, have a stand your ground law. Now, it's relatively recent, since 2011, so only about 12 years now. And it's got a weird quirk to it. So here's the relevant statute: use of force and self-protection. The use of deadly force is not justifiable if the actor knows that he can avoid the necessity of using such force with complete safety by retreating. So far we have a duty to retreat state, right? You can't use deadly force in self-defense if you have the option of completely safe retreat, except, and that was the law before 2011. It stopped there. What was added is what made Pennsylvania a stand your ground state, except that if you're not engaged in criminal activity, you're not in illegal possession of a firearm, you have no duty to retreat and can stand your ground and use force, including deadly force. And then there's additional conditions that have to be met before you qualify for stand your ground under Pennsylvania law. One is you have the right to be in a place where you were attacked, so you're not trespassing. You believe it's immediately necessary to protect yourself against death or serious bodily injury or kidnapping. These are just the normal requirements for self-defense, so nothing unusual there. You would need this to be justified in using deadly defensive force under any circumstances, right? And then it adds a third condition to stand your ground, which is unique to Pennsylvania. You have no duty to retreat before you can lawfully defend yourself with deadly defensive force, but only if the person against whom you're using that defensive force displays or otherwise uses a firearm or replica of a firearm or any other weapon readily or apparently capable of lethal use. So, of course, in many cases of self-defense, if you're going to your gun, if you're using deadly force in self-defense, necessarily that's because you're facing a deadly force threat. And often a deadly force threat will be in the form of the aggressor having a deadly weapon. And so you would satisfy this condition, you would not have a legal duty to retreat. But is it theoretically possible to be facing a deadly force threat from people who are not displaying a firearm or replica firearm or other weapon readily capable of lethal use? Sure. What if you're attacked by 5 people, all unarmed? Do they collectively represent a deadly force threat? Of course they do. But under Pennsylvania law, you would have a legal duty to retreat if safely possible before you could use deadly force in self-defense because they're not displaying a weapon. Does that make sense? Not to me, but that's how the Pennsylvania legislature did it. And often, folks, when you have about half, so there's 39 stand your ground states, about half of them are stand your ground by case law, common law, appellate court decisions. And there, the rules tend to be pretty simple. You don't tend to have all these conditions, like you were in a place you had a right to be and the other party was displaying a weapon. It's just straightforward. There is no legal duty to retreat before you can defend yourself in an otherwise lawful case of self-defense. But about half the stand your ground states are stand your ground by statute, meaning the legislature had to pass something and the governor had to sign it or veto it and have his veto overridden, which happens too. And anytime the legislature is crafting a statute, there's debate and negotiation that goes on. And some people say, well, I won't vote for it unless you put this condition in. And this appears to me to be one of those kinds of conditions. The making of the legislative sausage is often messy. In any case, the bottom line is that Pennsylvania is a stand your ground state and has been since 2011. So this article is wrong about Pennsylvania law, saying that Pennsylvania does not have a specific stand your ground law in place. It most certainly does. We just looked at it. And I think there was another reference here. Oh, here's another one. Pennsylvania is located near several states that have implemented stand your ground laws. For example, Ohio, West Virginia, and Maryland are neighboring states that have some form of stand your ground legislation in place. Well, that's true of Ohio and West Virginia. Ohio quite recently, only within the last couple of years. I think also 2021, I think, is when Ohio adopted stand your ground finally. It's true of West Virginia and has been for a long time. But Maryland? What is this about Maryland having a stand your ground law? Because when I look at Maryland law, Maryland is a duty to retreat state. What do we have here? This is a jury instruction on self-defense from Maryland. The Maryland Pattern Jury Instructions Criminal 507. Before using deadly force, the defendant is required to make a reasonable effort to retreat. If you find that the defendant did not use deadly force, so the duty to retreat only applies in the context of deadly force. That's quite true. Another jury instruction. In addition, before using deadly force, the defendant is required to make a reasonable effort to retreat. You should consider all the facts and circumstances in evidence in determining whether the defendant made a reasonable effort to retreat as far as he or she could with safety. That is duty to retreat, folks. So Maryland is not a stand your ground state. Even this is not really worded correctly. It says Ohio stand your ground law allows individuals to use deadly force without a duty to retreat if they believe they are facing imminent harm. Is that a correct statement of self-defense law in Ohio? No, it's not, folks. You have to be facing imminent deadly force harm before you're privileged to use deadly force in self-defense. If someone's about to shove you, that's imminent harm. You're not allowed to shoot them over it in Ohio. So just quite sloppy.